I'm still trying to make sense of everything that's happened even now. Even though it happened a long time ago, I'm still coming to terms with it. At the time, I was 52 years old, and I was living in Derby, where I'd spent most of my adult life, just getting along with working and doing whatever it is that I was doing. I'd been single for quite a long time at that point, wasn't looking for anyone, and I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just focused on work and saving up for retirement whenever that may come. I felt like I was pretty boring, really. I did the same things most weeks, just like everyone else did. I had my friend circle, and we went out together occasionally, but apart from that, I didn't do much. I did have a bit of money saved up, although it wasn't a fortune, but I felt secure about the future. I felt that life was predictable in a way, and I liked it like that. I didn't want constant surprises or drama or anything extreme. As well as going out with people in my friend circle, I also went out even more occasionally with people from work, perhaps once a month. And that was just something I did, and we'd talk about things and have a pint, but it wasn't anything serious, it was just boring living. The thing is, I thought I was happy being in that sort of life. I lived in a small house that was fully mine. I'd managed to pay it off, and that was a huge life goal that I was so happy to have reached. But if I look back, I can see I was probably quite lonely if I really think about it. I used to call myself independent, that's what I thought I was, but really, I was just lonely. I was looking forward to things that I'd planned, yet the things that I planned were so far away, I started to feel like, were they even going to happen? I was looking forward to stopping working, looking forward to doing something, yet the end wasn't in sight. That's exactly how I felt back then. With all that being said, and the fact I was just moving ahead with life and it was passing me by in a way, I wasn't expecting to actually meet anyone so quickly. The woman I met just so happened to be from the Philippines. A close mate of mine had just started dating a Filipino woman himself, and I was invited around for drinks at their place, as well as a number of other people. There were quite a few people in our friend group there, and because he was dating a Filipino woman, she had some of her friends there as well, and that's when I met this girl. They were all, these Filipina girls, married to people from England, and she was no different. She was 23 years old, extremely attractive, and when we got talking, I found out that she'd actually been living in Derby for around 2 years because, like I said, she was also married to an English guy who always seemed to work nights. I found her to be very articulate in a way that I wasn't expecting, and we just hit it off straight away, talking about all kinds of things, while everyone else was getting drunk around us and being too loud. I found out she was from a place called Leyte in the Philippines. I'd never heard of that before, and apparently she came from a very big family. She even talked about having 7 brothers and sisters, and I thought that was insane. And her parents still lived in the same house that she grew up in, and it was only very small. I found it very fascinating hearing about her life and what it was like, and it was very different to anything I personally knew. I felt a bit strange though when we exchanged numbers that night because obviously she was married and I wasn't that type of guy. But without even knowing it, I'm sending her texts and she's responding, and we're just chatting about things, and it became just something that we did. About 2 weeks of chatting by text, I was a little bit drunk, and I sent her a message asking if she would like to go out one evening in town when her husband was at work, just as friends, and just to catch up and have a good time. She responded almost immediately, saying she'd love to. She'd love to go out with me, and that evening she talked a lot more about the Philippines and what it was like there. She even showed me pictures of her whole town and her family and the beaches where she lived, and they were so amazing and completely different to any beaches I'd ever seen before. And then I find we're meeting up more and more, and I'm looking forward to meeting her. Meeting her was the highlight of my week. She always used to say that her husband didn't really like going out too much and wanted to stay at home when he wasn't working, and she got bored a lot of the time, and because of that, she wanted to see me more, and it was quite weird. We spent a lot of time together, but nothing happened in the early stages. It was just like we were friends. But I felt an attraction to her that I didn't expect, and I think potentially she had an attraction to me as well. I didn't know anything about the Philippines. I didn't know anything to do with anything about that. So I was just taking everything as it came, because part of me was feeling so happy, yet part of me was feeling a little bit scared. From there, we were seeing each other regularly over the next few months. We kept meeting up for dinner when her husband was working nights, and in the daytime, we would go for coffee as well. I knew what was happening, and I knew deep down that it shouldn't be happening, and I wasn't stupid, but I couldn't stop myself from seeing her, so perhaps I was stupid. The thing was, I felt she was different from anyone I'd ever met before. She was so full of life, and she had these exciting stories about things in the Philippines, and that drew me into her. Then she started telling me a lot more about her marriage, how she'd met her husband when he went to the Philippines, they got married, and he brought her back to the UK. She went on to talk about how things weren't great between them, and they always argued a lot. And apparently, at least what she said, he was very controlling about money. She said he didn't want her working, didn't really want her to go out and see her friends from the Philippines, and because of that, she felt like she was trapped, like she couldn't leave because she needed to stay married to him, just for the visa that she had. Also, that meant she couldn't go back to the Philippines because her family didn't have enough money and she needed to be able to help them financially. I listened to everything she talked about, and part of me knew that I should be very careful. Yet I was drawn to her. I listened to all these things that she was talking about, but deep down, part of me knew I should tell her to work everything out with her husband. But then again, another part of me was glad that things weren't going well for her with that regard, because I started to think about me being with her. The first time she came round to my place when her husband was at work, it was just to talk about things, really. Honestly, that's all it was. But a few times later, things changed. She kissed me, and then after that, there was no going back. We started to have an affair. We met whenever we could, and then we were constantly texting each other when we couldn't see each other. I felt guilty about it sometimes, I really did, but when I was with her, I forgot about everything else, and she made me feel so good, I just moved forward with things, not thinking about the effects I would be having on her husband. I really couldn't help myself. The affair kept going on and lasted for over 6 months, and by then I was completely obsessed with her. I couldn't think about anything else at all. She was the only thing on my mind, and she'd come round to my place at least 2 or 3 times a week when her husband was working, and those were the best times of my life, and I'm not exaggerating. She cooked me some Filipino food a few times, and I thought it was interesting to see a part of her culture that I had no idea about. The thing I loved the most was listening to the stories about how she described what it was like growing up where she was from. I was starting to feel like just seeing her 2 or 3 times a week wasn't enough for me. I started thinking maybe I should go and visit the Philippines with her one day. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but what I was doing made me feel happy, and I was convinced that her marriage was basically over. At least that's what she said, and they weren't meant to be together anyway. She always said that she loved me. When she told me she loved me one time, that was after I'd known her for 6 months. I was completely taken aback, because I loved her too, but I didn't feel like we were there yet. It's very difficult, though, when you're talking about the future and what it could be like if we were together, and if she left her husband. I did tell her that I would love to take care of her. Then completely at random, one day she called me, crying because her husband had found out about us. She said that he knew everything, and because of that, he'd kicked her out of the house, telling her that he wanted a divorce and she'd have to go back to the Philippines. She came straight to my place with a few clothes, and that was all she had, and of course I let her come in. I was actually really happy about it, even though she was upset, because I felt like it could finally mean that we were able to be together without hiding anymore. I couldn't believe it when she actually moved in. The first few weeks were absolutely brilliant, and it was like we were a proper couple. We were going out shopping together and cooking dinner together and watching TV together, just like every normal couple did. Her husband did start divorce proceedings pretty quickly, actually. He wanted her out of his life completely, and she didn't fight it. Who can blame him, really? I mean, he wasn't to blame in this. I know what people might think. I know what I would have thought if it was somebody else doing it. He invested his time, his money, just to try to give her a better life, and she completely disrespected him. I get that, but I loved her, and I didn't force her. She did seem to be quite worried about her visa status, but I did tell her not to worry about it because we could get married soon. We could get married as soon as her divorce came through, and everything would be fine in the end. If I think about it, if I look back, it was like I couldn't control myself. I was just so madly in love with her, and because of that, I even helped her to find a job. It wasn't much, it was just working at a shop, but she seemed so happy to have that kind of independence, and when she found out how much money she was earning, and she compared that to how much she could earn in the Philippines doing something similar, she was so happy. And from there, I'm working and she's working, and we're just starting to plan our future together. I can't stop thinking about going to the Philippines and wanting to go and look and see what it's like, and she starts talking about wanting me to meet her family, because she said they'd love to meet me. At the time, I was earning okay money, but like I said, I had a little bit of money saved up, but nothing much else. So when my next holiday came and she had a holiday, I booked us flights to go to the Philippines for 3 weeks. That would be her first time going to the Philippines since she and her ex moved to the UK, and she was so happy to be going to see her family. She's talking about everything that she wants to take me to see when we get there, who I'd meet and what we'd do. It wasn't only the fact I was going to the Philippines which made me feel so excited, it was also the fact that I was going to be going with her. That made everything even more special. Her divorce came through just before we left, and it was our intention to get married when we came back. Nothing like an actual ceremony, just a normal registration. I felt like everything fell into place, at least I thought that at the time, if only I knew the truth. I was really full of energy when we made our way to the airport for our flight to Manila. It was our plan to stay there for a bit before flying down to Tacloban, which was the closest airport to her hometown in Leyte. The moment we landed, that was when I knew I was somewhere like nowhere I'd ever been before. It's difficult to describe unless you've been, but it wasn't just that it was different, it was completely different, yet similar at the same time. Manila shocked me beyond belief, and I wasn't really sure if I actually liked the city very much, because it was always busy and crazy, and you couldn't go anywhere without sitting in traffic for such a long time. It was good to experience it though, and we stayed in BGC, which was the part of the city that was the most modern. Apparently, some people compare it to Singapore. When we did make it to her hometown though, in Leyte, that was when I felt a really great connection to the place. It was as if Manila was one thing, and this was something altogether different. It was very beautiful there, it was close to the ocean, and I couldn't believe just how great it was, because places like that were never shown on TV back at home. We were always fed the same kinds of holiday destinations on the holiday programs, places like Spain and Portugal and Greece, and, if you were very adventurous, Thailand, but never did I see a program about the Philippines. Her family's house was very simple. It was just made of standard concrete blocks and it had a tin roof. It did have a few holes in it as well, but it was clear that they'd made some form of effort for our visit. They were quite concerned when her previous marriage broke down and the fact that she'd met someone else so quickly who seemed to love and respect her. That was all they cared about. And they prepared so much food, I actually wondered who was going to eat it all. That's when more family started to arrive, and before we knew it, the house and the area all around it was full of people who were in her family, and I just loved how communal it was, so very different to how things were at home. Her mother was really kind and sweet and made sure I was comfortable, and her father was a bit quieter, but he was still very friendly, and it was such an interesting experience. We actually stayed in the family's house for a whole week, and although it was very uncomfortable, I actually enjoyed it because to me it was different to anything I'd ever done before. We went to look at the local sites and the beaches, and they were so amazing, and I'm sorry to keep talking about it because they were nothing like beaches I'd been to in Europe. I had my first Red Horse beer, the Philippines beer I think has a little bit of gin in it, and I just felt like I belonged there, like I was accepted there, and I was part of something a lot bigger than just me. And then I started to understand exactly why she missed it so much. One thing I noticed very quickly, being in the Philippines, was just how cheap everything was compared to how much things cost back in the UK. I'm not just talking about living expenses and things like that. I'm talking about land which was affordable, and building a house was a fraction of what it would cost to build the same house at home. It really did seem like you could live well on not very much money at all. When we were there, my girlfriend had already started talking about the possibility of maybe moving there eventually after I retired. I thought that sounded like it was a good idea. We could build a really nice house close to her family, and we could even look at land that was available right now just to see what it was like. We went to look at some land available for sale right next to the beach. It needed a lot of work doing to it, and the road to get to it wasn't paved, but it had potential. It seemed that the owner was very eager to sell it because they needed some money quickly, and right then I was actually tempted just to buy it. I didn't buy it because we weren't going to be spending long enough there, and we left after spending an incredible week with her family to do some more travelling around the Philippines, which is when we went next to Bohol. We started out in Cebu for a few days, but Bohol became my new favourite place in the Philippines. Although I could understand that if we were going to live somewhere, it would be better if it was closer to her family, but I could tell my girlfriend was happy to be able to show me around her country. She seemed to be really proud of it, and she just kept saying how much better our life would be if we were able to live in the Philippines as opposed to back in the UK. She talked about there being no more cold winters, no more expensive bills to pay. It would just be a simple life that we could live by the beach. Maybe we could even open a small business. I'm just listening to all these ideas and everything sounds so exciting. And perhaps Leyte could become a place that people started to go for tourism because it was so beautiful. By the time we were flying back to England, my head was crammed full of all these plans that we talked about and all the dreams I was thinking about for our future together in the Philippines. We did get married a month after we got back. It was just at the registry office with a few witnesses, and it wasn't anything elaborate. But the fact that I was now married, I felt great. I felt like we were amazing together, and things would only get better from there. I was 54 when we got married, and our life mainly revolved around planning for our eventual move to the Philippines. The thing was, I felt like I could actually move there and retire early, because I had my house that I could sell, which would give me a big chunk of money, and what else I had in savings would add to that and pay for a place to live. We should have enough to pay for a place to live, and what I had left to live off the interest. It wouldn't have been a lot of money every month, but it would have been enough to give us a basic existence, and from there we could have done a little business just to try to make a bit more on top. We actually went back to the Philippines 2 more times over the next year, and each time we were looking around her area at the different properties that were available and what we could build for certain prices, and also the land and things like that. We all know that foreigners aren't able to own land in the Philippines, so everything would have to be put into my wife's name. But I didn't think twice about that, because we were in love and she was my wife. We were building our future together, and what was hers was mine, at least that's what I thought. We actually decided to buy that piece of land that we'd seen close to the beach on our first trip. They still hadn't managed to sell it, and we got it down to a really knocked-down price. And the thought of actually living somewhere exactly like that was so exciting. The house we pictured was going to be great. We wanted a full 2-story house, 4 bedrooms, a modern kitchen and bathrooms, and just everything that we would need to make it perfect. We were always being introduced by people that we knew, or should I say by people that my wife knew, to somebody else who knew somebody who could do work for us. And that's how we were introduced to a contractor that could build a house. Apparently, or so we were told, they could give us a very good price. But we weren't yet ready to build, and because we'd bought the land, we didn't know when we were going to build, so we didn't want to rush. We bought that on our second trip, and on the third trip, that was when we actually decided that what we would do is build the house when we were in England, and as soon as it was ready, we would go there and live in it. I had enough money saved, I had enough savings for the land and the house, then I could sell my own house for cash, and use the interest it would provide for an income. I mean, some people thought I was very crazy just giving up everything and moving to the Philippines, but I didn't care what they thought. This was something that I felt was thrust upon me, and I had to take advantage of it because I didn't think I would ever get such a good opportunity ever again in my life. When the construction finally started, my wife was in constant contact with her family about the progress, just to make sure that everything was going smoothly. They always sent us regular pictures every single week showing that the foundation was being laid, and then the walls were going up, and then, before we knew it, they were already putting on the roof. It did look exactly like that little model that we were presented before we even built the house. It was exactly how we wanted the house to be. While they needed money from time to time for extra things on top of the agreed price, it wasn't too much more, and I never questioned it because I understood that construction projects can often go over budget, and I just kept sending them money whenever it was asked for. My wife would always get so excited every time we got new pictures, because that was her dream home, and it was becoming a reality. Also, if you think about it, that was my dream home as well. We decided to visit again. That would be our 4th time there, because we wanted to see the progress in person, and when we got there, I must say I was really impressed. The house was taking shape so well, and it didn't seem like it would be very long before it was completed. They estimated it would take approximately 3 more months, and that would include all the inside work, the tiles and the fixtures, but seeing the structure in place was amazing. I was always good staying at her family's place because to me, it was just a temporary kind of solution. I knew I didn't need to spend all my time there, and even though it was rough and different, part of me felt like I achieved something by being able to stay there. The person who was in charge of the construction of the house was always very friendly towards me and assured me that everything would be finished within about 3 months. They had so many workers there, and he seemed to be the guy who made about 99.9% of the money, whereas the people doing the work made so much less than him. I thought that it was probably less than a subsistence wage, so I actually gave them all a bit of a tip before we left, just saying good job and keep up the good work. Because of that, my wife's family kept telling me I was really generous and how lucky their daughter was to have found someone like me, and I felt good that they thought like that. From there, we flew straight back to England and started preparing for our permanent move to the Philippines, and that was when I gave notice that I was going to quit my job. I put my house on the market and hoped it would sell soon, and my savings were getting depleted with the construction costs and the house costs, but I figured once we were living there, the expenses would be low, and what I got from my investment income would be enough for us to have the sort of life that we'd always talked about for such a long time. I was just about to make the big move. I hadn't received an offer on my house yet, but I wasn't too concerned because I knew it would sell eventually. But something happened that really made me feel a little bit concerned. It was only 3 days before we were due to leave for the Philippines, and typically, as is often the case, I ran into her ex-husband at the local shop. That was the first time I actually ran into him, and he just looked at me and shook his head and said, "Good luck, mate. You're going to need it." And then he sniggered and walked off. I didn't know what he meant by that, and I just thought it was because he was very jealous that I was now married to his ex-wife, and he wished that he was still married to her. But if I think about it now, I really think he knew something that perhaps I didn't yet know. We got rid of all the furniture that I had in the UK because there was no point shipping it out, and we flew to the Philippines with just a few clothes that I had and 1 or 2 items that I didn't want to be without. They were very personal to me, so let's just leave it at that. I was about 55 then, if I remember correctly, and it seemed to finally be the time to start what was meant to be the best chapter of my life. The house was ready when we got there, everything was done, and it felt so amazing. My house in England was very small. It was connected on either side to other houses, and it was on a busy street, full of cars parked up front, and often I didn't even get a chance to park my own car at the front of my house because someone else had claimed the space. Yet here, the house we had was massive. We had a plot of land where we could park our car at our own place, and there was land everywhere that we could use for whatever we wanted to use it for. It really was amazing to be able to have such a house that at home I wouldn't have even had time to spend dreaming about owning something like that because it was so far away from what I could have had. I could tell that my wife was so happy to be in the Philippines as well, and she was happy to be with her family. And because she was happy, that definitely made me even more happy. And from there, we just settled into life. It took me a while to actually live there. I mean, to adjust to living there. From things such as the climate, the food, and just a different pace of life altogether. Her family always came round to visit, and that was a constant. They would stay for dinner, and from there it shifted from dinner to dinner, and could we borrow a little bit of money and other things like that. I didn't really mind too much at first because I just thought that that's how things worked in the Philippines and family was so important. My wife sorted everything out in terms of the bank accounts, the utilities, and all the official things like that. And I will admit that I was completely dependent on her for pretty much anything. While I could go to the shops and buy things without her, anything a little bit more official or legal, anything like that, I needed my wife to do it all for me. And before long, unfortunately, I started to feel a little bit isolated. I was spending so much time in the house by myself when she went out with her family or when she went out running errands. And while part of me was so happy to be there, so happy to have done something so unique with my life, it was, if anything, a slight anticlimax after we'd been there for a while, because the novelty just wore off and reality set in. If only that was as bad as it got, I would have done very, very well. A few months go by, and for the most part I'm happy with the decision I made, but almost like clockwork, I started noticing things that really bothered me. These were just things I overlooked completely when we were visiting. For example, my wife spent a lot of time going out. Sometimes she'd go out all day. When I asked where she'd been, she would just say that she went with her family somewhere or she had things to do down in town. I know it's something that many people say, but she changed so much since we moved there. She wasn't anywhere near as attentive as she used to be, and she didn't seem to be as interested in spending any time together. And her family? They were always asking for money. Always something that was needed, and someone who needed some money for something, whatever it was. And the thing is, when we were there visiting, they were exactly the same. But I thought, we're visiting right now, so the fact that they're asking for little bits of things, it's because we're going to go soon. In my mind, once we're living there, they're not going to be asking for things all the time because we're living there. But I couldn't have been more wrong. I tried to explain to my wife that I couldn't keep giving money away. We needed to be careful with what we had because we needed to live on this forever. But then she starts getting upset because I didn't understand the Filipino culture. I'd put so much money into this house, I didn't really have anything left. Perhaps maybe £5,000 or £10,000 at the most, and my house sale had still not come off. But I wasn't too concerned, but I could have been if things didn't progress. The money was continually going down, and if the sale didn't happen though, that's when it could get bad. A few months go by, and for the most part, I'm happy with the decision I made. But at this point, I have hardly any money left because of all the money that's gone, and my house sale hasn't even happened yet. I don't even know if I should sell my house at this point, given the fact that everyone is asking for money from me all the time, and my wife is also expecting to be able to have what she wants when she wants it. When we were in England, she didn't act like that. She didn't appear to want things all the time from me, and she just seemed to be like a normal, genuine girl who wanted to be in a relationship with someone. In the Philippines, and I'm not talking about when we went to visit, because she was the same when we went to visit as she was in England. But when we were living there, oh my God, it was awful how she changed so much. One day, my wife informed me that she needed to go to Manila for a few days because she had to sort out some kind of paperwork for the house. She said it was something to do with the taxes or the titles. I didn't really understand it. I didn't know how the legal system worked in the Philippines, and I didn't know that that excuse for needing to go to Manila was so insane I could have written it off straight away as being a complete lie. But because I didn't know the Philippines and how things worked there, I believed her, because I couldn't do anything else. She left early one morning and I was there, all alone in the house. And I guess that was probably the first time I'd actually been alone since we moved. I tried to keep myself busy that first day, but I felt so strange being in such a place like that when my wife wasn't there. Like if I didn't have my wife there, would I even be there? Definitely not. I wouldn't want to be somewhere like that. I tried to call my wife a number of times that day and evening, but she didn't answer. I sent messages and she didn't respond, and then I'm starting to think that this can't be right. She should have landed a long time ago by now, and why hasn't she called me? I went to the local shop and bought a few large bottles of Red Horse, the 1-litre bottles that they have there. I bought 3 of them, and I went home and drank one of them immediately. I'm starting to feel quite drunk, and I start to drink another. And then I thought it would be a good idea to look around the house to see if I could find anything of hers that she wouldn't want me to find. I was starting to get paranoid. I didn't actually expect to find anything, but hidden in her dresser drawer, stuck on top of the drawer, I found a phone. I can't exactly explain how I found it, but let's say you pull out the drawer and you see items in the drawer and you think, okay, there's nothing there. But then you reach your hand inside and she'd cut a little hole at the back. And then if you put your hand in and reached up, there was something stuck there. I could feel it, and it was a phone. I turned it on, and luckily, or unluckily for her, depending on which point of my life I was at, she didn't have a PIN code to get inside, so I opened it. And the first thing I saw were all the messages. They destroyed me. They were love messages from a Filipino guy from the local area talking about their future plans and what they were going to do, and they talked about me as being the key to get them back together. I kept scrolling, and there was one message about her ex-husband, and do you know what she said to him? She said her ex-husband was not good enough because he didn't have enough money. She wanted to finish with him. She was talking about how she was looking for someone else who had more money than her ex, and as soon as she found that person, things would move forwards. There I was, sat in this house that I put my life savings into, believing I was in love with someone who had used her ex-husband, and now she'd used me. And because I had something, she got things out of me, and I couldn't believe that this had happened. I didn't know what to do when I found out all that. My wife hadn't answered ever since she'd left, and I thought it pointless to keep trying. By this point, I was already on my 3rd-litre bottle of Red Horse, and then she finally called me. Conveniently, she said she needed a little bit of money to smooth something out, and she asked if I could send it to her. Because I was so drunk, I remember starting to laugh at her saying, "Do you think I don't know the truth? I found your phone and I know everything." I could tell she was trying to be defensive straight away, and she just said, "Don't be silly, what are you talking about? I'll come back soon and we can talk about things. Can you send some money, please?" She said it again. I just said, "Absolutely no way am I going to send you any more money. I need you to come back so we can get this sorted out." When she came home, I could tell from her body language that something was wrong, and I explained by showing her the phone with the messages on exactly what I had found when she wasn't there, and I asked her to tell me what was going on. She just told me it was her friend, apparently, her friend from when she was younger. And while he was her boyfriend before, they definitely weren't together anymore. She told me I was being paranoid and jealous, and I told her not to be ridiculous. This is something you have with him here. You're talking about your ex-husband not having enough money. Everything like that. Can you explain to me? Can you please explain to me what's going on? Then she just said, "What do you want me to do?" I hadn't expected her to say that, because what was I meant to do? I put my life savings into this house, and I was just lucky and thankful that my house sale in the UK hadn't happened yet, and I still had that. But then I'm thinking, I don't really want her to be able to go back to England with me, so in that moment I had to play it safe. My idea was to be as clever as I could, otherwise I was scared she could come after my house in England. Even though she shouldn't be able to get it because it was mine before we married, I was still paranoid about that, because I didn't know how depraved she really was. I must admit, I spent a few days thinking about the best course of action when I found this out. And what I thought about doing was making sure that I was in the Philippines when her UK visa expired, and then she wouldn't be able to get back to England. So I just told her, if possible, please can you break it off with him, and we can have our life back. She believed me. She actually believed me, and she said, I promise you, I'll never let you go. I promise you, I will get rid of him, and we can live a good life. The fact that her ex-husband seemed to know exactly what had happened, I was starting to think that was the reason he divorced her, not because he found out about me, but because he found out about this Filipino guy. That's what I suspected to be the case, but I could never prove it. Luckily, her UK visa only had a few months until expiry, and during those months, I must admit to spending a few £1,000s more than I would have liked to have spent, just to make sure that I came across as being the person she thought I should be, without raising any suspicions. Those were the hardest 3 months of my life. During those 3 months, because I'd already made up my mind that I needed to leave the Philippines at all costs and go back to England and get away from this person who I just found out was the devil, I wanted to make sure that I got the most out of my remaining time there. My wife is being as affectionate and as kind and as nice as she has ever been, just like she was when we met, and that made me think that she was a very, very good actor. I have to ask this question though, are all women the same? Was it just her dream all along to stay with her Filipino boyfriend and they were trying to come up with some kind of solution to get what they wanted at all costs? I will never know. I will never know. That is what it felt like though. When those 3 months came to an end and I knew full well that her visa had expired and she couldn't get back to England again easily, I just thanked God for the incredibly difficult visa rules in England. Unless you're an illegal immigrant and you can go over freely on a boat, then you're welcome. But if you're trying to get there on a proper visa, do everything properly, it's extremely difficult. So there was no chance of her being able to get back to the UK again. I just told her I wasn't happy anymore. I didn't want to live there. I lost the house, but I'd saved my house in England. And that was a small crumb of comfort, given what could have happened if the sale had gone through when I hadn't known what the truth was until it was too late. I'm telling this story because I want other people out there, other guys out there to know what can happen. How easy it could be to lose so much money when you think with, let's just call it your heart, instead of your head. I didn't think I was naive. I was a grown man in his 50s. I thought I knew better, but I got played right from the start, just as easily as anyone else. The Philippines itself is a beautiful country, and I'm sure, in fact I'm guaranteed, that there are real and genuine people there, and there are genuine relationships between foreigners and Filipinos. But there are also people like her, who target foreign men and think of them as nothing more than walking ATM machines. I'm not saying everybody's like that. In fact, I know most people aren't, but it's very scary to think that she got married to someone who took her to England. He invested his time and his money to give her the better life because he loved her, but he didn't have enough money. So the excuse of her not being nice or being demanding was completely false. She latched onto me and was everything that I would have wanted from a girl. Every single thing that I would want from a girl was who she was, and she used that to her advantage to get me to marry her. She got me to marry her, got me to fall in love with her to make sure she could freely leave her ex without having to go through any hardship herself. She was very close to getting everything. I was just so fortunate that my house sale didn't go through. I'm older now, I'm still working, and I'm still living in my same house. On paper, I'm still married, yet I've been assured by my solicitor that my house is safe regardless of what she would do. She hasn't tried to do anything, and she didn't even try to stop me when I left because she knew there was no point. Just don't be like me. Don't be the fool who falls in love with someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart.